So today is my favorite video of the year, and that's where I get to share with all of you the 5 best books that I have read all year. This year I read about 68 books, I think, which is a bit off my target. I was hoping to read around 80, but that's okay. That was a good enough number for me. But out of those 68 books, which 5 really stood out? And today I want to share with you that list. And there were a lot of them that could have made that list, but I really narrowed it down to the ones that stayed with me, that blew my mind while I was reading them for whatever reason. And as I explain to you what the 5 books are, I'm also going to be sharing with you what I liked about it. And what's great is I think these 5 books represent quite different things, and so there's a little bit of something for everyone. So without further ado, here are my 5 favorite books for 2025. The first book is a book called Nuclear War, a Scenario by Annie Jacobsen. This is an absolutely terrifying nonfiction book that details a minute-by-minute scenario in which a rogue nuclear missile has been launched at the US by North Korea, and it outlines what would happen in that scenario, minute by minute, where the missile is detected, how, by whom, how that information is collected, how that process was built throughout history, through which historical episodes was this gradually put together. It explains the nuclear capabilities of the US and of other strategic rivals. And as time is ticking, and as this missile is getting closer to hitting the US, you see the information flowing up the chain of command at breakneck speed because, in fact, there is very little time to make a decision, and you get a view of what happens when that information reaches the president of the US, who essentially has to make a decision if to strike back and how to strike back from a variety of options. And that whole process, again, is detailed with both a great historical perspective of how those processes were gradually built, how those capabilities were assembled, why they've been built in the way that they've been built, and the pressures they change. And what's amazing is that the author has really researched it and interviewed a lot of players who have been closely involved with this process, with these scenarios, putting together these scenarios. So you get a real insider's view of what would happen in a nuclear war in the first half hour, what's going to go down, how are the decisions made, and what are potentially the consequences, in terms of the response, the counter response, and so on. It's absolutely terrifying. It's eye-opening, and you realize that we live in a world where these nuclear capabilities have the potential to destroy our planet on pretty basic miscalculations. And so we live really on the knife's edge. There was a movie that was made by Catherine Bigelow this year on Netflix. I think it was called The House of Dynamite. Pretty good movie made on a very similar concept. I'm not sure if the movie was vaguely adapted from this book, but it's essentially a very similar concept. I've watched the movie, I've read this book. I can tell you the book is so much better than the movie, as is usually the case, because it goes into so much more detail of every little element of how the decision's made, why the president is rushed into this room or onto that helicopter or whatever. Everything is really detailed and very well researched. So I really loved this book. That was my 5th favorite book of the year. My 4th favorite book of the year, in 4th place, is this incredible novel that I really enjoyed called Drayton and Mackenzie by Alexander Starrett. He is a British-German author. I loved it for 2 reasons. First reason, it's a great 19th century kind of novel with a big, meaty story with great characters and a lot of propulsive energy, and that it hovers between this kind of quite macro context of the world and what's happening in the world. And it also looks at the more micro elements, the personal, emotional, human elements of the story, and it blends these two elements really very well. The second thing that I loved about this book is that it is a business novel, which is a near mythical being these days. And when it does pop up, I find business novels, or even business films, business series, to be always terrible and always lacking in realism and lacking in interesting insights. And this really hits the nail on the head in terms of getting it right. What is it like to build a startup? What is it like to be an entrepreneur? What are the challenges that these entrepreneurs face? And this is a story of two young guys who graduate university in the middle of the financial crisis, and eventually they become partners in a renewable energy startup that they co-found. And it's the story of how they are going to build that business and navigate the industry and navigate the challenges and deal with the managerial problems of being with people who have families, who are dependent on them, to whom they have responsibilities. And it really hits the nail on the head of, this is what it's like to be a business person. This is what it takes. This is what you have to do. And there's a lot of stuff that's not glamorous. And I think in an era where we see a lot of bullshit online in social media, like, this is how you become a millionaire, the millionaire mindset, and all that kind of crap, this is what an entrepreneurial journey looks like. And it's really well detailed. And one thing that I loved is how the two co-founders of the business are basically archetypes of different personalities that are needed to be successful in business. One is a very data-driven, somewhat autistic, kind of almost neurodivergent individual who has no people skills, but knows really kind of the strategic shifts that he needs to think about and how to finance these things and so on. And the other one's a bit of a blagger, not so sharp on the old numbers and so on, but a great people person, the great handshaker, the guy who makes the contacts, lubricates the deals, and makes them happen. And I just thought it was so great how the book played off these two characters against the other and showed that in business, you need a little bit of both. It's not just about the numbers. It's not just about the blagging. It's a little bit of both. I thought this book was incredible. I interviewed the author for my podcast. The link is in the bio. You should check it out. We had a great chat about this book and the 4 books that shaped his literary journey towards writing this. And now we come to the third best book that I've read all year. And it is this novel, Flesh by David Saleh, which actually I just read very recently. And this is the book that won the Booker Prize this year. And, you know, I don't know why I was feeling quite contrarian about this book before I read it. I'd heard it won and I was like, oh, I'm not gonna like it. And people were talking about it and I was just not feeling the vibe. I was getting ready not to like it. I was priming myself to hate it. And but I read it, and I have to say I have to eat my words because this is a fantastic novel, really very well done, and I totally recommend it. And how wrong I was to think that this wasn't going to be my jam. It's so good. It's got a couple of very interesting elements about it that we need to talk about. The first is what everybody seems to be talking about around this novel, which is the pared down minimalism that surrounds the main character. So basically the main character is this young Hungarian boy who It's the story of his life as he grows into adulthood and into old age. What's immediately remarkable about the way this character is presented and the whole premise of the book is that he never really expresses very much, right? And his dialogue consists mostly of the word okay or good, very monosyllabic answers. He is not really an active participant in anything. He basically lets the world around him carry him. He drifts with that destiny, and his character, his personality, despite so little output from him, is very clearly defined, and I think mostly due to a lot of bouncing off the other characters that surround him and that help propel his story forward. Because he seems somewhat passive, and yet life moves forward and he moves forward with it. And a lot of people have said, oh my God, it's too minimalist, or oh my God, it's really a bit silly that this guy, all he says all the time in the book is okay, or whatever. I actually really liked it. I thought it could have gone a step further. I thought it would have been even more crazy, innovative, and experimental to really pare it down to near zero output from that character and see how far you could push that concept. But I understand there might have been commercial limitations to that. And so you need to give the reader something. You can't just have kind of an empty vessel like that. What's interesting about that approach is that the character is a little bit evocative of the main character in the French novel L'Étranger, The Outsider by Albert Camus, which is a classic of existential literature, which is an examination of the absurdity of life, right? And I kept asking myself when I was reading this, is this trying to tell me that life is absurd? And I don't think that's what it's trying to say. I think there is superficially that feeling, but I don't think it's trying to say that there's a meaninglessness to life. And one of you pointed this out in the comments, and the more I've been thinking about it, the more I think I agree with that point of view. It's not about the meaninglessness of life, but I think it's more about the sense that there is something predestined and preordained in our lives, that choices that we make are potentially not within our control and that we might just enjoy the ride. And given that, one might argue that then why do you need to give any output as a character? Why do you need to say anything? Why do you need to do anything? Life is going to go on and carry you. So there's a certain determinism there. You feel that there's a destiny in this person's life that's carrying him. And I don't know, I'm probably getting all of this wrong, by the way. So maybe if you spoke to the author, you'd be like, that's not at all what this book is about. But that's what I felt. And that's what I enjoyed about it. One thing that is awesome about this book that I don't hear enough people talking about is the fact that it is a retelling of another great classic novel, which is Barry Lyndon, The Luck of Barry Lyndon by William Makepeace Thackeray, which was adapted into a movie in 1975 by Stanley Kubrick. The movie starred Ryan O'Neal and Marissa Berenson. Beautiful film. And that book and that movie was the story of a young Irish rogue making his way into aristocratic European and British society, only to face a very swift downfall. And this is that same story, but in the contemporary world, essentially. It's a retelling of that story. I didn't get enough of that in the chatter around this book. So I'm telling you now, that's essentially what it is. If you enjoyed Barry Lyndon, This is Barry Lyndon in 2025. So a really great book to follow, and I really recommend it. It reads so easily, and yet at the same time, it raises all these questions about fate, determinism, the meaning of existence, and the way that this trick is performed stylistically, the way that this character's minimal input generates this maximal thematic output, I thought was pretty cool, actually, and well worth remembering and well worthy of a Booker Prize. And now let's look at the second best book that I've read all year. I really hesitated whether this should be the best book or the second best book. It's an incredible novel, very, very powerful. It's a French novel, but stay with me. This is the book La Maison Vide by Laurent Mauvignier. This just won the Prix Goncourt in France. It's France's most prestigious literary award. It's kind of like the French Booker Prize, and I think it's a very worthy winner. Just a quick note on this author, whom I had read previously. I'd read a book of his called The Birthday Party, and that was a crime thriller, which was fascinating, really intense, suspenseful crime thriller. It takes place in contemporary France. But it's like a crime thriller as written by like James Joyce. There's a lot of interiority, a lot of inner monologue, a lot of backstory, stream of consciousness, and all of that coalesces super well into something really thrilling and gripping that takes place, in a weird way, it takes place at super high speed and at super slow speed. And I don't know how he pulled off that trick, but The Birthday Party was an awesome book. So when I heard earlier this year that this book, La Maison Vide, had been nominated for the Goncourt, I was curious about it. And I thought, well, I'll see how this whole process evolves. And lo and behold, this book won the Goncourt. And I was very happy to hear it because it gave me an opportunity to read another one of his books. So this book, La Maison Vide, which in English translates as The Empty House, is a completely different book. This is not a crime thriller. And I'm very impressed that the author is able to navigate different genres so deftly. A completely different book. This is a semi-fictional family saga of his family across the 20th century. And specifically, it looks at the women in his family and how they navigated their lives in a French society that was very conservative, very rigid, and that evolved historically, gradually, with some pretty crazy events, the First World War, the Second World War, and how these women navigated those events and also their own personal family traumas, their dashed ambitions, their quashed loves, the way that they were treated, and how those traumas that they inherited from their own parents, specifically their mothers at times, was then passed down across generations to their descendants, and how that trauma echoed and resonated alongside the history of France. It's absolutely riveting how he does it. I couldn't put it down. I loved it. There was one character in the book who is the author's grandmother, who is just one of the most finely nuanced, ambiguous characters that I've come across in a long time. You don't know whether to love her or hate her or pity her or hug her. You see her, you understand where the pain comes from, you understand why she's acting like she's acting, and it's absolutely so touching that I was crying quite a lot in this book. It really impacted me. I also want to talk about the prose and the style of this book, which was impeccable, beautifully done. At times it was very lyrical and flowing, and it mirrored the bucolic nature of the countryside around the house, and just absolutely wonderful. It felt like just flowing down a French river on an autumn afternoon. It's literally how it feels. And at other times, the prose was adapted and reshaped to really fit a different vibe, a different kind of emotion, and it could be very terse and direct, and at times quite funny. And so there's this kind of great balance, this equilibrium between those different types of registers, and the author balances the whole thing really beautifully. And so, of course, if you say to me, or if I say to you, hey, there's a novel about a French family, and it's a long novel that flows across their interpretation of memory and time and the meaning of life and their existence and their trauma, and the prose is super long and flowing and lyrical, you're immediately going to think of Marcel Proust. And that's what it brought to me. I was really thinking, wow, this is almost like a spiritual air to Marcel Proust and to his magnum opus, In Search of Lost Time. It really flowed like that, and how memory is the raw material for personal experience and existence. I mean, big, heavy stuff here. And the whole time that these big, heavy things are happening in your head, the story is gripping. You can't put it down. You want to know what happens next. So it's an incredible trick to balance these different weights and that different momentum in such an excellent way. I was really impressed, and I really recommend this book. If you can't read in French, no worries. For sure, this book will be translated into English, because it's just won this hugely prestigious award. It's a mega bestseller, and so somebody's going to translate it into English. So I'm putting it on your radar now. Keep it in the back of your mind. Oh, this is the book that won that prize in France, and the family saga and everything. This is the book, and I really, really recommend it. And now we come to the best book that I have read all year. And this was a superb novel from a superb novelist. And it is this book, In a Strange Room, by Damon Galgut. Let's give a little bit of background here. Damon Galgut is a South African writer who has been nominated for the Booker Prize a number of times, and finally he won it in 2021 for his book, The Promise. This book was nominated but did not win the Booker Prize. I absolutely loved The Promise, which I read when it came out, but I hadn't read anything else from him, and I thought, now's a good time to hit some more Damon Galgut because it's just so good. Like The Promise, this is fundamentally a postmodern novel, and that word may seem difficult or complicated to many of you, but actually what I mean by that is it's almost synonymous for playful. Playful with linearity, playful with perspective, playful with points of view. It plays. And this book looks at the experience of being away from home in other places, and looks at the experience of an unnamed narrator who is put in different situations in different travels. And the book is presented as a triptych of travels. The first trip is to Greece, the second trip is to East Africa, and the third trip is in India. And all of those trips are going to evoke and suscitate certain themes, certain emotions that the narrator is going to go through. But what's cool is that the point of view, the pronouns that are used for the narrator constantly change. So it goes from like I to he, sometimes in the same sentence. So it's really a bit discombobulating, but it has that effect of giving you a sense that you're outside the body of the narrator at times, that you are observing it from outside. The prose is absolutely amazing. The style is just impeccable, straight to the point. And you go through it and you have a sense that you're hovering above life in a way. I know this sounds weird to say, but you have a sense that there's a comprehensive element to this novel about what it means to be alive, what it means to go through certain events, how you deal with them in different contexts, especially in contexts where you are in a strange room. You are away from your place of comfort and how you react in those situations. It's an incredible book. I really, truly recommend it. I recommend anything by Damon Galgut. In fact, I interviewed this author for my podcast. The interview is in the bio, so check it out. It's a really great chat. If you haven't read it yet or haven't read anything by Damon Galgut, I think he is a phenomenal writer. I really recommend it, and I think it's well worth checking out. So that's it for me. Those are the 5 best books that I read all year. I would love to hear your comments. Share the books that you've most enjoyed this year. Let me know in the comments. If you want more great reading recommendations or great podcast interviews, check out my other accounts on Instagram and Spotify. Also, sign up to my Substack newsletter where I share a lot of great weekly content around great stories and great authors. And in the meantime, keep reading and Happy New Year. Thanks a lot.